right, hello, hello, hello. It is now about 7 o'clock, so we can go ahead and get started here when you guys are ready. So my name is Sean Flattery. I work with Brandon Murphy over at Principal. We do a lot of network vulnerability scanning and trying to convince people to fix things either through patching or configuration. One of the tools we use actually lets us do these automated network scans, and if you give it credentials, it can log in using Pseudo and run a bunch of commands to get you results, which is awesome. So we tried going around and convincing people who own these systems to let us have root access to their box and run we didn't know what. Naturally, that didn't go over well with them, so we had to figure out what this proprietary program was doing under the hood to do all their checks. That's kind of what led to this research and this talk. Most of it's going to be about Sudo commands because there's so many cool things you can do with Sudo. And then the last little bit is going to be using Auditd, which is the way we figured out to track and audit this stuff. So first section is Sudo here. Sudo. If you have never seen this, now you have. What is Sudo? So it used to stand for super user do. It's now kind of like substitute user because it used to only be root. Now anyone can use it, which is kind of nice. And if you're on a Linux distro, you've got it. If you want to see if you have Sudo rights and what things you can run as Sudo, you can do a sudo-l, and it will tell you that. It's a great thing to do when you're new to a system, or if you're a pen tester and you've taken someone's access, you want to see what you can do. It's the first command. So the configuration for this is at Sudoers. It should not be world readable, so that's a fun thing to check for if you're auditing. You cannot edit this directly. You have to use the special vsudo command in order to do that. And you should probably do that using Sudo as well. Interesting thing is this opens up in the default text editor for you. So if you have a certain favorite text editor and you hate these other text editors and you're forced to use something you hate, you can actually change that. It's a global variable. So there's the information there. You can pass in your variables with sudo-e as well. Otherwise, Sudo will run as the other user's environmental variable. This is kind of like the standard default Sudo that people do. And this is the format that they do it in. Username, obviously the user you're granting it to. All is the system they can use this on, so you can use one file for multiple systems. Pretty nice. The prens all is the commands or the things that they can run as, so the different user you can give them. And last one is the actual commands themselves. That's kind of the syntax of the file. Please don't grant all. Like that's a bad idea unless it's your home laptop, which is kind of by default. Like a lot of your personal devices will let you just do anything as sudo. But if you're doing this like in production with work with lots of other people, this is a bad idea. You need to figure out exactly what kind of rights they need and grant just those rights. I actually have probably too much boring information here. I'll try to skip through some of it. And all this will be made available for reference too. But there's a lot of awesome things you can do. There's a default wheel group that you can usually use just to grant somebody wheel access, and then they're in the Sudoers file, so you actually have to edit the Sudoers file. You can group your functions together by groups instead of users. There's some built-in aliases that have predetermined commands, so you don't have to do all this research on your own. You just want like a network admin to be able to log into your Linux box and do networking type stuff. You can grant them the networking alias. So that's pretty nice. The bottom is an example here. I originally gave this talk at the Linux users group, so hello for the few people who have heard this already. And so that's why it's in there. But you can specify exact command arguments too, which is really important when you're going to be granting very granular Sudo access to somebody. And you need to have a good understanding of what those things do. There are some commands, like the find command, that you can then toss an exec into it, and execute whatever it finds. So if you let somebody just run the find and any argument from the find variable, you've then given them full root on the box, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of you going in there and just giving them find access in the first place. So if you don't know what some of those options are, do man and then your command, look through it, try to look for something dangerous, and don't let them do that. You can also specify no command line arguments too by just doing quote quote. So that's a nice awesome thing. And there are certain special characters which are different in your Sudoers file over lots of other files, so they're notated there at the bottom. You just have to escape them if you want to put those in your Sudoers file. There's also some weird bug that I ran into. Sometimes your remote script fails because it doesn't have an interactive session, and this is like you are wondering why you can run the sudo commands yourself but not remotely. This is why, so you just need to go into the file and change this information. There's another awesome thing you can do. You can restrict the program run to make sure it matches a SHA-2 sub. So if you're in a high security environment and you're really worried about somebody modifying your binaries, or if you're using some like custom in-house binary that a bunch of developers have access to, and you don't want those developers just to escalate to full-on sudo by just changing their code, you can do this. So that's pretty sweet. Yeah. I don't know. That's a great question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I ran into this in the documentation and thought someday I'll hopefully try this out. And you know, maybe one day I'll get to that. But that's a great question, Tom. Another cool thing that comes with the Sudoers package is a program called PseudoEdit. So again, going back to text editors, if you don't want to have to grant somebody sudo access for Vim or Vi or Emacs or Nano or whatever their personal favorite text editor is, you can grant them PseudoEdit privileges, and then they can choose whatever their text editor is. When they want to use that with sudo privileges, they run PseudoEdit in the file they want to edit, and it loads it in their preferred text editor. So that's pretty cool. It loads everything in a temporary file, and then the root process later on, after you're done modifying, takes your version and copies it into the actual file. So you can also use any of your local save variables too. So if you have like a vimrc file that you absolutely love, it'll use all that. Here's a couple of just sudo commands. It's like netstat. With those exact tags, you can get the process ID. Normally you have to be root to do that. If you want to grant people the ability to see the actual like process name and with the process ID, that'd be awesome. Last one is for some insecure file settings that you could look for. But this just shows you some of the more complicated stuff you could look for. Another big thing is if you think you've got your Sudoers working right, please test it out in production, or not in production. Test out in your lab. Don't test it in production. Yeah, don't do it live. Don't Bill O'Reilly it. Just make sure that it operates the way you think it does first, because it's really easy to mess up a file and when you a command, and when you're doing all these long configuration settings, you might mess something up, or it might not work the way you intend it to work. Yeah, so I strongly recommend doing that. It's also it's fun to try to break out of what you're doing too, like, and then you start learning more about how this works as well. One of the things I was worried about when I was first looking at this was, well, what if I just pipe something? So here's a sudo command I can run. Can I just pipe the output here? And then have root access, or can I redirect it over to a file? Like, can I do these kinds of things? And you end up really learning more about how the system works by testing what you're doing. So that actually should lead in the next slide. Yeah. So if you have commands with a semicolon, the sudo will only apply to everything up to the, including semicolons. Redirects and pipes, it doesn't apply. So that was something fun I learned. You cannot echo into a file you don't have access to. So you can grant people PseudoEcho rights. I don't know why you'd want a PseudoEcho, unless you're like a really weird proprietary program. But yeah, that's not something to worry about either. It's just another thing that comes out of testing your config. Can I do something stupid with this access? There's also a link at the bottom of the page of some bad sudo things that you can give. So you can, like, easy ways to escalate out of sudo restrictions. Yeah, so with part 1, he had 4 parts at the beginning of the web page, and he never got to the end. So it was one of those things like he started back in 2012. You know, he may still get to part 4, but it's not me writing that blog either, by the way. So that's another tidbit. So that's kind of most things with sudo. Anybody have questions on sudo or anything I went over? Has anyone not used sudo before? Awesome. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons for that. Auditing is a big reason. You want to be able to track who is entering in the commands. So that's another good thing, like, to restrict people from doing with sudo. Just don't grant them sudo su. It kind of does, yeah. And depending on your environment, you'll get various levels of logging. Yeah. Because it's an information leak that's kind of unnecessary. So it doesn't just say what your user can do, it says what all users on that box can do. And if you're really dumb and you have one global Sudoers file that you push across all like 1,000 of your boxes in your infrastructure, and you say, because one of the things you can do is say, this applies to only this system. So you could potentially, just by looking at that Sudoers file, get sensitive configuration information on all sorts of other systems. You could find which accounts don't have sudo restrictions, and be like, ooh, that user can do whatever the hell he wants, so I want to go take his credentials. Maybe I steal his NTLM hash, maybe I phish him, maybe I just ask him for his password, whatever. Like, there's a lot of ways. So, yeah, maybe he doesn't lock his screen. Like, there's so many dumb things that can happen there that you can take over that information. And as a user, figuring out what access you have, that goes back to sudo-l. So you run that, it'll tell you, and just you, all the things that you can run. So that's a nice, safe way of letting people see that. Other questions? Sudo? All right. So this segues kind of what you're asking. Like, well, there are some logging mechanisms to see what people are running, right? Auditd was the one that I kind of came back to because on the OS we were using, our secure log didn't really tell us all the information we wanted, and some of the sudo commands that were being run were really weird and weren't fully being passed through. So it's real quick through Auditd. If you haven't used that, it's a great kernel level auditing feature. It works not just for sudo but all sorts of logging. By default, it doesn't log sudo commands. So after you install it, you just need to edit this information here on the screen. Again, I'll share all those slides. So, Auditd comes with a few built-in commands: AU search, AU report, and AU last. And you may wonder, like, well, why do you need these commands if they're just text files? Well, Auditd likes to play a little loose with it and have some fun. They base64 encodes some of your commands, but not all of your commands. So if you actually want to search through them, you need to be using these command line tools for it. The other nice thing is if you have lots of logs and those logs are getting rotated into separate files, instead of saying, just look at these files, just by running that command itself, it will know where the files are and it'll look through all of them for you. That's kind of nice. AU search is the big one to use to look through any of your audit logs. AU report, actually, just go to the page that says this. These are some of the helpful command line arguments that you can give in order to use that program better. AU search-I is the thing that you'll want to be using like pretty much all the time, because otherwise the base64 stuff can't check through. So -I in memory will decode whatever that is and allow you to find whatever it is that you're looking for. You can do cool things about like show me everything on a user session. So let's say you've, for whatever reason, start off searching, you see this guy ran a sudo command on a certain sensitive file, and why was he doing that? He probably shouldn't have done that. I want to see everything this guy did. Then you can use AU search-session, throw in a session ID that you just got from your previous query, and see every single thing that that person did in that session. So that's pretty cool. You're looking for like forensics information for tracking after somebody fell victim to a phish, and they happen to be on a Linux box, and you've set this up, and hopefully you've shipped those logs to another system. This would be something you could do. You can watch certain files. So if there's certain files you care more about than others, and you want to see every time that file's changed, you can log that for you. You can search by user's login ID, UID as well. A lot of cool things there. Here's a couple of like awesome, helpful ones to get you started. The first one shows you any kind of bad logins, anytime somebody tried to open a file and couldn't. So it's like, why are they trying to get into that? It's interesting. And it looks for syscalls, so this actually does hook directly into the kernel, which is another awesome way to track it. Some of the other methods are more susceptible to being tampered, so that's why Auditd a little bit nicer. And you can search for any commands that have failed. So if somebody's trying to sudo something and they don't have access to it, and it's causing them problems, this is what you can use to see what they're actually trying to type in. Maybe they put in a different command line argument that you didn't expect, or in an order you didn't expect, and something they probably should have been able to do they couldn't do because your Sudoers file configuration is different. This will tell you that. This is also was super helpful with us when we were trying to figure out what the heck this weird program was that was running weird sudo commands. So first we asked the vendor, hey, what does it do when it logs in as sudo? And the vendor's like, well, that's secret. They wouldn't tell us. So after going through all this, I took a text log of all the commands and I uploaded it on their website for them. Next cool report or command is AU report. So this is a nice way to get high-level report information. So you can do like, oh, what are the most often run sudo commands, or who's always failing to log in, or things like that. It can read from standard in, so you can pipe to it from AU search. Outputs and columns, you can summarize data. So there's some of the cool things. You can just show the executables that are being run. Nice stuff like that. And this isn't just for sudo, by the way. You can do this for whatever you want. And AU last, I don't know why they have this. It's last, but it's the AU version, and you can still run last. Other cool stuff I didn't get into yet, but is on my checklist of things to look at one day when I have free time, is to have Auditd take actions based off of certain log events. So if I wanted to have a honeypot and want to know whenever somebody reads secrets.txt file, I could have it automatically email me every time somebody does that. It's pretty cool. Or if I've got somebody port scanning me and I want to see X many blocked port attempts, if this happens based off logs, block that IP. Question? You could ship that with syslog, yeah. The files that Auditd uses aren't the same as syslog, but you could just configure your log shipping stuff to ship that over or watch those files, yeah. And all of those like take action things are independent of a SIM or an IDS or anything like that. So you can use these to build additional layers on top of your existing countermeasures. I am not using any of that right now. Professionally, things are happening in the company I work for, but they're not in the same area that I'm in. So, and if you don't like Auditd, there are some other methods that you can use too. Varlog secure usually works pretty well. Varlog authlog is another way that usually has what you want. Again, in my example, it didn't have quite the detail. If you're using systemd, you can use journal control to actually show you anytime someone entered the sudo command. So that's nice without using audit log. And this is kind of a sample output that I probably won't be sharing online. I know it's super small, but there's a certain company name in there that I don't really want to share online. But this gives you an idea of some of the output and the crazy stuff that they'll see. I know it's really, really small, but at the beginning there's a timestamp. It'll say the host name. It says sudo and the user who's making that sudo request. It shows the input that came over, in this case TTY. It shows the current working directory they were out of when they ran that command. It shows the user they wanted to run the command as, which in this case is root. And it shows the actual command entered in, which is the very last thing, and that's why some of these are so long. In this case, the company wanted to echo their name at the beginning of every line, run the command, and at the end of that, they wanted to add in like their company name out. And I think that's probably for their parsing mechanisms for them to deal with these outputs. You can't see like, but the first command they ran is, can I just run this PseudoEcho command? Can I just echo just normally? And if I can, that's the privilege elevation test. And they actually like said that right in there. That's what they're echoing to the screen, privilege escalation test. So if I wanted to trick that program into thinking that it had rights, I would allow it only the ability to say that and then laugh as it fails. In this case, I wanted to actually use those functionality, so I let it have that. But if you wanted to, I don't know, have a honeypot and mess with somebody new, I don't know. It's just something you could do. Yeah, and then I've got some reference stuff here. There's a lot of guides and walkthroughs and documentations and the manual too. The manual is super helpful for this kind of stuff. Questions? No. Okay. Yep. Yeah, so you want to audit the commands being run, and probably, hopefully, if you've got the space for it, every command that your users are running. Ship all of that in real time off to a log aggregator using syslog or whatever your favorite thing is. And then, you know, if you have Splunk or Elk or something like that, you can do some automated queries to search for certain keywords that you want. If you want to use some of the Auditd functionality, you could then use that directly on the Linux box that everything is coming out to. I don't know, what did you have in mind? Okay. Well, yeah, the big problem is, okay, you've got this data, now what are you going to do with it, right? Like, you should probably be periodically looking through it, maybe running some interesting searches like what's the most used commands, what are the least used commands. new commands, yeah, something you've never seen before. Anything that's like more than X characters, that might be interesting. Because usually people use very short commands, so you get something like 20 plus characters, there might be something good in there, right? Yeah. Yeah, and by default, there's a lot of that Auditd stuff that's already turned on. And so you can monitor all those things and log that and ship those logs and alert on them as well. You know, you can look for, I'm not super familiar with Auditd, so forgive me here, but I believe you could look for file size, or not file size, but like hard drive limits, you run out of disk space, stuff like that. You could monitor it. You monitor it for different performance. If processes that you expect to be running all the time are dead, you could monitor that. I mean, it's a way to audit different system calls that go through the kernel. So there's a tremendous amount of stuff that you could go through. My experience with it was pretty much just, what the heck is this weird vendor doing? And so I dived in just enough for that and to find some cool things that I want to come back and play with. So unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about it. But you could always figure it out and come back and tell us. Yeah. There you go. Do you guys have a Slack? Is that the preferred distribution method? Or website? Okay. Yeah, so I've got this up on Google Drive, so I can just throw up a link. We can put that on the website or Slack or whatever, and anyone can get to it.
Is this thing on? Hey, I just want to say thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate, thanks again to Pillar for providing the space, and for everyone giving the talks tonight. Hang out. We've got this space until, I don't know, 3 a.m. Is that what normally? 3. Yeah, okay. So yeah. All right. For a little bit at least. So hang out. I think there's more food, there's more drink. Here to socialize. Get to know. If you see a new face, welcome them. If you enjoyed what you saw tonight, invite your friends. We want to grow this community and have more people talk. Oh yeah, there's stickers. If you don't have stickers, get a sticker. Put on all the things. Find mailboxes, whatever. Doesn't matter. Hey, in the back, Mr. Heckman. Set KC in the house, that's right. Represent. Rickson came all the way up from Kansas City to be with us tonight. Welcome. Yeah, and we're probably likely going to have a road trip in January to go down to Set KC. They're having a bunch of workshops. So it was the second Tuesday of the month? Second Thursday? Second Tuesday in January, so we'll probably organize a road trip if anybody's interested in going. But then otherwise, see you guys in the Slack channel, and then again next month, third. Oh, the theme for next month is all things DNS. So a lot of people, several people talking about DNS, and was there another topic, or is it just all DNS? All DNS all the time. So we'll learn about all the terrible things you shouldn't do with DNS, and then all the good things you should do with DNS. So look forward to that next time. Thank you very much. Have a good night.